Hi, and welcome back to Football Made Simple. In 1977, Pele predicted that by the year 2000, an African team would have won the World Cup. Fast forward almost half a century, and in all honesty, they haven't even come close. In fact, the closest an African nation has come is the quarterfinals, 3 times by Cameroon, Senegal, and famously Ghana. But how has a continent that's home to 1.2 billion people, where football is overwhelmingly the most popular sport, not done better? A continent which has produced great teams in many other sports, as well as produced great players like Abedi Pele, Yaya Toure, Salah and more, not scaled this final war. Well, ahead of the final of AFCON 2019, we assess why Africa has yet to win a World Cup and which country is most likely to. But just before then, if you're a football lover and would like regular videos on managers, players, tactics and more, go ahead and hit subscribe to join the community. And if you enjoyed the video, a like would mean a lot. Anyway, let's get into it. Generally in the World Cup, Africa had been trending up, with at least one team making it past the group stage in most tournaments. However, the 2018 World Cup was a massive step back, with no teams making it past the groups. Let's assess the reasons for this before diving into what countries could do to improve performances, as well as which nations are most likely to break the duck. So when assessing reasons for these performances, we'll split them into 2 camps. External reason, i.e. things they have no or limited control over, and internal reasons, which are reasons within their control. We'll start external. The first problem to acknowledge is that the lack of a World Cup is not just an Africa-only problem. The 21 World Cups so far have been shared amongst just 8 teams, 5 of them from Europe and 3 from South America. So, North America, Asia, Oceania, and Africa combined for a total of 0 World Cups. And in fact, since the 1986 World Cup, aside from Brazil, all other tournament wins have come from Europe, which underlines just how big a task winning a World Cup is. Another problem is slot allocation. Since the dawn of the World Cup in 1934, there have been a total of 442 slots available, and of those, just 44 have been from Africa, or roughly 10%, a paltry sum compared to some other continents. Fewer representatives simply means a lesser chance of winning. And yes, the argument can be made that it's the quality of the team that's the problem, not the quantity. And those are arguments we'll go more into later on. In line with this is the issue of hosting the tournament. Of the 21 tournaments, only the 2010 World Cup was hosted within Africa. This may or may not seem insignificant, however, 6 of the 21 tournaments, almost a third, have been won on home soil. England won their sole title on home soil, whilst France, Uruguay, Italy and Argentina all won their first title at home. And to broaden this out, of the teams to finish in the top 3 at a World Cup, 11 are from home nations. The bad news is that FIFA have gotten rid of their organization rotation system, which sees the tournaments move sequentially from continent to continent, so it'll be a while before it comes round to Africa again. Then comes a fundamental problem, the issue of infrastructure. As Cooper points out in Soccernomics, to excel at sports, the formula is finding talent, nurturing it, and then supporting it. And this cycle requires money, and with many nations within the continent viewing sport as more of a luxury, that's not possible. The reasons for these lack of funds may stem from a more political route, which we won't stray into, but the bottom line is that it means that countries within Africa are less capable of developing high-quality leagues with lucrative sponsorship deals. This, as a result, leads to talent drain, which manifests in 2 major ways. Initially, there's first-wave talent drain, where young players are approached by big clubs with a chance to join their academy. The lack of money within their game means that academies in Africa are not at the same level, with most just receiving informal training, so players would choose to leave to the better academy. Next is second-wave talent drain, where slightly older players from 18 to 22 leave their league, usually for lower-profile European leagues, before trying to work their way up into the top 5 leagues. Both forms of talent drain mean a country's best players don't stay within their local league, so there's lower level competition in the lower league, which results in a lower quality of player in that league. And this talent drain also leads to talented players choosing to play for their adopted nations rather than returning to represent the nation of their birth. And on a related note, talented players in the local league will constantly be overlooked for players who may not be as good, but play in a big league. This then sends players out of their local league in order to boost their chances of playing for the national team, again reducing the quality of their league. There are many rapidly developing countries in Africa, but even these countries may only have had 20 to 30 years developing their football culture, whereas other continents have had several decades to do so, so it becomes an impossible game of catch-up. Countries in South America can claim a similar lack of finances. However, they've had a century of footballing tradition behind them, leading to a higher quality of player. Countries like England, with high population and a great infrastructure, which pumps billions into the game, hasn't won a World Cup for half a century. So one wonders how nations with a fraction of the budget are supposed to compete. But there are cash-rich countries in the Middle East and elsewhere who have failed to win a World Cup. So to blame everything on finances would be disingenuous. So let's move into the internal factors, or factors within their control. Staying with finances, a major problem facing many nations is corruption. Simply put, it's a common occurrence that when a federation receives money from an AFCON or World Cup tournament, or even just money from their government, instead of allocating those funds towards areas such as academies, facilities and more, the top officials will instead keep the money for themselves, putting the individual ahead of the team. An example of this was a top Ghana official being caught in a match-fixing scandal just before the Brazil World Cup, and yet the official kept his job throughout the tournament. The trickle-down effect of this is players seeing officials who don't care about their well-being, and this may affect morale. In addition, it means players may not receive financial compensation for playing in the tournament from their federation, as the money goes into their pockets. This wouldn't be a problem, for example, in the Premier League, where players get paid millions by their club anyway, but most players in local leagues are in a much worse financial situation, so fees at the World Cup may be the most money they ever receive. This has led to teams like Cameroon, Ghana and Nigeria protesting pay disputes in the past, which disrupts preparation. Another factor to note is that no foreign manager has ever won a World Cup, and yet many African countries consistently appoint C or D grade managers from other nations in a bid to improve results. The countries who do appoint local managers will usually just employ former players who may have played in an international league but have limited coaching experience. The problem here is not with employing foreign managers, rather that the funds are not being allocated to develop their own managers, hence these C-grade managers may be a better option. In general, if the quality of their local managers improved, the league would improve and the best managers in these leagues would be better than these C-grade managers. Now, the last issue, youth tournaments. Africa is wildly successful at youth World Cups. Nigeria have won 5 under-17 cups and Ghana have won 2, making Africa the most successful continent. At under-20 level, Ghana have 1 World Cup and several nations have a top 4 finish. So how is this a bad thing? It's not necessarily, but the age profile is important to keep in mind. Many of the countries mentioned will use players at the upper age limit for the tournament. So, 17-year-olds playing at under-17s, 20-year-olds playing at under-20s. And there's no inherent problem with this, but other countries will usually have the best players of this age playing with the senior team. For example, Sancho, Hudson-Odoi, and Goetze back in the day. So, by having them play against better opposition earlier, they improve in the long run, so they sacrifice short-term success for long-term gain. So, which countries are most likely to buck this trend and go past the quarterfinals at a World Cup? Well, the good news for African nations is that there's a lot of inherent talent. Despite the mitigating circumstances, winning a youth tournament will always be a net good thing. FIFA rules have also changed, allowing players capped for another country at youth level to represent a different country at senior level. So many players may still choose to represent their home nation after turning out for a different side. And the 2026 World Cup will allow 9 teams from Africa to participate, so this may help. Short term, there are several candidates, but we'll focus on a couple. The best African talent is in West Africa. Senegal have perhaps the strongest team, and during the next World Cup, the minimum aim should be to get out of the group stage. They feature top talents like Koulibaly, Mane and Gueye, who will be in their peak years in 2022, alongside players like Kouyaté and Keita Balde. All of this is coached by a great local manager with international experience in Aliou Cissé. The Ivory Coast are an interesting proposition, having missed out with their golden generation. Now they can look to the likes of Zaha and Pepe for hope, and they're headed by Renard, who has already won 2 AFCONs, so this could bode well for them. Long term, South Africa are interesting to look at. Their footballing pedigree may not be the best, but they have a good general sports infrastructure as shown by their cricket and rugby teams. So would added focus on football put them into contention? We'll have to wait and see. Morocco, another football-mad nation, has begun a resurgence in recent years, and we'll hope this upward trajectory culminates in a great showing. Of course, there are several other countries in contention we haven't had time to look at, so if you leave a comment below explaining why they're your pick, that would be great. Are there any other reasons we missed out? When do you think an African team will win a World Cup? Let us know below. That's all for today, and remember, keep it simple.